Hi everyone, I'm Saul Stoogenke. Today we're diving into the Cognitive Information Processing Perspective, or CIP. If you've ever felt like your brain has too many tabs open when trying to make a career decision, this theory is for you. It treats career choice as a problem-solving task. I'm excited to show you how it works. So this theory didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was developed by a team at Florida State University. They basically looked at how the human brain processes information and applied that logic to career counseling. As Zunker notes in our textbook, they moved the focus from what do I want to be to how do I learn to make better choices for a lifetime. CIP is a cognitive theory. Its main assumption is that our emotions and our thoughts are totally intertwined. To make a good choice, we have to be ready, meaning we have the right information and a healthy mindset. The goal here isn't just to find a job, it's to teach the client to be a self-sufficient problem solver. So cognitive information processing theory says that effective career problem solving and decision making require the process of information in 4 domains: self-knowledge, options knowledge, decision-making skills, and executive processing. So think of this pyramid here as the data storage of our career brain. At the base, we have knowledge, knowing about yourself and the world of work. The middle is the decision-making layer, which we'll talk about more in depth next. But look at the top slice, executive processing. That's the boss of the brain that monitors our self-talk. If that top layer is full of negative thoughts, the whole pyramid structure tends to fall apart. So diving deeper into that middle section, if the pyramid is the what, the CIP cycle is the how. It starts with communication, that gut feeling that a gap exists between where you are and where you want to be. Then we move into analysis, where we gather information. And then synthesis, where we brainstorm a long list of jobs before narrowing it down to a short list of maybe 3 to 5 options. Once we have that short list, we hit the valuing stage. This is where we ask, which of these fits my values and helps my family, my lifestyle, those around me? And then finally, we move to execution. This is the action phase where I go to an interview, I sign a contract, and then the cycle resets to see if the gap has been closed. The cool thing about cognitive information processing is that it's heavily researched. Because it started at a university career center, there's decades of data. Research consistently shows that using this model reduces career indecision. It's a very practical, evidence-based approach that's been tested with everyone from middle school students to veterans. So a really important first assessment when looking at assessment tools is the Career Thoughts Inventory, or CTI. It doesn't tell you what job to take. Instead, it identifies the dysfunctional thinking that we talked about earlier. Like, I'm not good enough for anything. Because once we find those blocks, we can use the CTI workbook to reframe those thoughts so that a client can actually move through the CIP cycle. Some additional assessments that are helpful are the Career State Inventory, which looks at immediate readiness, and the Decision Space Worksheet, which looks at prioritizing more complex factors that play a role, like one's thoughts or feelings or circumstances. Zunker also points out that during step 2, the preliminary assessment, a good tool is the My Vocational Situation assessment. That aims to measure the stability of one's own perceptions of their own goals, interests, personality, and talents. Now let's look at a song that captures the brains of the CIP operations. Billy Joel's Vienna. This is one of my favorite songs. I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. This was a fun exercise for me. Vienna is the ultimate anthem for the executive processing domain. In the CIP model, the executive processor acts like a project manager. It's responsible for things like self-talk, self-awareness, and monitoring our progress. When Billy Joel sings, "Slow down, you crazy child. You're so ambitious for a juvenile," he's essentially acting as an externalized executive processor. The lyrics address a common problem in career decision-making: system overload. When the song asks, "Where's the fire? What's the hurry about?" it's challenging the negative or frantic self-talk that's likely to paralyze clients. And then the line, "You can't be everything you want to be before your time," is a lesson in cognitive monitoring. Don't burn out. It's about stepping back, evaluating your career choice process, and realize that Vienna waits for you, meaning the goal is still there, even if you take time to process the information correctly. CIP doesn't exist in a vacuum. It works with other frameworks, like these. Holland's Ryasek model provides the what. It maps personal styles to occupational environments, helping us categorize the options that a client will process through the CIP pyramid. Learning theory, LTCC, defines the how. Just like in CIP, the counselor acts as a coach to help the client identify work through dysfunctional thinking and beliefs that stall their progress. Lastly, the trait factor theory is a good filter. It's a practical tool used to rule out a bad fit, ensuring the client's objective traits align with their chosen path before they commit to an execution plan. So practically speaking, applying the CIP model in a clinical setting follows a 7-step sequence. First, you start with the initial interview to build rapport and hear the client's story. Next, you move into a preliminary assessment to see how ready the client is to make a choice. Step 3 is to define the problem and analyze causes, where you figure out exactly why they feel stuck. Once the problem is clear, you can formulate goals. Essentially, what does success look like for your client? From there, you want to develop an individual learning plan. This is a crucial component of the CIP model. This is the roadmap of activities they will complete. Step 6 is to execute that ILP. With you, the counselor, together, and you acting as the coach, they can then follow through on that individual learning plan model. Finally, you want to conclude with a summative review and generalization to ensure the client can apply these decision-making skills to any future hurdles. That's a key component. A successful CIP model is one where the client can then apply decision-making skills. All right, so let's put what you've learned into practice. And on the screen, I have 8 questions a counselor might ask. They are randomized and out of order. Let's see if we can identify which stage of the CIP 7-step process or the CASAVE cycle we are in. First up, which of these options best aligns with your family values and long-term needs? This is a critical moment in the CASAVE cycle. What phase is it? This is valuing. We are weighing the options against the client's inner circle and personal belief system. Next, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel in making a choice right now? Which step is this? That is step 2, preliminary assessment. We are gauging their readiness before moving into the deeper work. Okay, now, how did it go when you reached out to that contact we identified last week? That is step 6. You execute the ILP. The client is taking action, and we are acting as their coach. Up next, what brings you here today, and what is the gap you're feeling? So, where are we? We are at step 1, the initial interview, or the communication phase of CASAVE. We're identifying the gap between where they are and where they want to be. All right, next one. If you face a similar career hurdle in 5 years, how would you use this process again? This is step 7, the summative review and generalization. The goal isn't just to find a job today, it's to teach them a process they can use for life. So let's look at the next question. Are these difficulties coming from a lack of information or perhaps some negative self-talk? That is step 3, defining the problem and analyzing the causes. We're digging into the executive processing domain to see what is blocking our client. All right, 2 more. What specific steps like job shadowing or research should we put on your to-do list? This is step 5, develop the ILP. We are creating that learning plan, the actual roadmap for their growth. And finally, the last question, what are the top 3 goals we need to hit to bridge your career gap? This is step 4, formulate goals. We are turning that gap we found in step 1 into concrete objectives. Great job, everybody. I hope that game was a little bit fun and more applicable. So moving on to the next slide, when we apply CIP to diverse populations, we have to look at how this information processing approach translates across different worldviews. According to Stoogenke, there are some clear wins and some areas where we need to be careful. On the strength side, CIP is highly empowering because it doesn't just give the client a job, it gives them a reusable skill. Because the valuing phase specifically asks the client to consider the impact of their choice on those around them and their community, it's actually more inclusive of collectivist cultures that many other more so than many other Western theories. However, we also need to recognize the limitations. It's a very rational and individualistic model, which can sometimes clash with cultures that prioritize spirituality or communal harmony over logic. It also assumes the client has the agency to choose, which might not be the case for someone facing severe systemic or economic barriers. As counselors, our job is to use the structure of the CIP model without letting it become a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't account for cultural and social needs as well. So to wrap up, I want to share why I'm personally drawn to this model as I look toward my future clinical practice. I've lived with OCD, and my kids have. And in my own career, that's been both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because I'm a thoughtful researcher and I'm extremely efficient and detail-oriented. But it's a curse because it can lead to debilitating career indecisiveness or dysfunctional thinking, where you're so afraid of just making the wrong choice that you make no choice at all. For a client with OCD, analysis paralysis isn't just being unsure, it's an actual cognitive block. The counselor's job is to help the client monitor their own self-talk. By using the CIP cycle, we take those swirling intrusive thoughts and move them into a structural workflow. We move from the communication phase where the anxiety lives into the analysis and valuing, which helps the client objectively weigh their options rather than just feeling them. But also at this stage, identify cognitive distortions or intrusive thoughts that might be limiting their progress. Essentially, CIP allows us to take the energy of overthinking and then redirect it into structured problem solving. It's really a great tool. It teaches the client that they don't need to find the perfect job. They need to master a reliable process. I think this is a well-rounded model that uses a clear 7-step process with complementary assessments and a series of logical steps that help the counselor and client work together to ultimately provide the client with more independence and self-reliance moving forward. So, time for an executive processing challenge. I've put together a quiz based on what Stoogenke describes as dysfunctional career thoughts. So look at these 6 statements. 5 of them are actually cognitive traps. These are common dysfunctional thoughts that Peterson and Sampson identified as blocks to the CIP cycle. Take a second, read through them, and which one is the rational path forward? All right, so if you chose C, you hit the bullseye. Choices A, B, D, and E, and F all represent common hangups like perfectionism or external pressure or catastrophizing. In a CIP counseling session, we would use the CTI workbook to help the client recognize these traps so they can get back to the actual work of solving their career problem. So to help you build your own toolkit, I've selected 4 high-quality free resources. The most valuable is the FSU Open Publishing page with the full digital content for the CIP from the original authors. It's a complete digital library where you can read the theories research, get practice guides for free. I've also included the FSU Tech Center for application-focused resources and helpful videos. ONET online for building a foundation of occupational knowledge with your clients is also helpful. And the National Career Development Association's Career Governance website magazine, that has some great practical case studies, some articles, and some really interesting book reviews that were there. These are all open access, so you can dive into them immediately after this presentation. Don't worry about access or payment gates. And finally, here are my references. I used our Zunker textbook primarily, along with a few others, but the most important to note is the original published article by the research team at Florida State, Cognitive Information Processing, Career Theory, Research, and Practice, which I found extremely helpful. I hope you all found this insightful, and thank you for your time.